Hey guys, so I'm writing about our self-disclosure discussion board that we did this week. I'm on the fence a little when it comes to self-disclosure. I feel that there are many pros and cons that come along with this technique. I also feel that there are certain times when the counselor shouldn't disclose certain information about themselves to the client. I made a list of some pros and cons, mainly for like my own notes, but also wanted to like share them in the discussion board post. Um, and it's about like how counselor self-disclosure could affect the counseling relationship with the client. Some positive aspects that I have down is that showing that your client that you're real. If the client knows that you're going through a similar situation, then it shows that you're not a robot, that you have feelings, that you could probably relate to them in some sort of way. Also, you can develop deeper intimacy in the helping relationship, offering behavior that your client can model. So if you overcame like the situation that you share a commonality with, it can, and how the counselor overcame it and is doing much better. Maybe the client can model from that. And also reduce shame. The most common reason for patient non-disclosure is maybe shame, guilt, judgment, fear of being judged. So if the client knows that the counselor has gone through the same thing, they might feel more apt to talk about it, knowing that they would feel less shame, less judgment, knowing that the counselor went through the same thing. Um, and also helps, like, it can help develop trust and making a client feel heard. But there's also some negative aspects to self-disclosure. One that I have is it shifts the focus from counseling away from the client. If the counselor goes in to talk about themselves, um, it kind of makes the client feel unheard and that the attention is taken away from them. It can also create boundary issues, and also with gender and cultural differences, it can also create a little gray area there. After comparing these pros and cons, I really couldn't stick with a definite answer of whether I was for it or against it. The best that I can probably say is that it solely depends on the situation and the client. The best thing to keep in mind when thinking about disclosing information about yourself, or in any counseling session for that matter, is that the client always comes first. Whether or not you disclose personal information, you always need to keep the client's best interest at heart and put them first. I think when topics that tend to have more depth and are more emotionally charged, I think a counselor should not disclose personal information. One example that I can think of is maybe a client who comes in and wants to discuss their recent divorce that they're going through. The counselor, who is also going through divorce, maybe might feel the urge to disclose this information to the client because it shows that they have something in common. B, it might help the counselor feel good to talk about it with someone who's going through the same thing. They might just have that urge. I don't feel that the counselor should disclose the fact that they're going through a divorce right now as well. If the client knows this information, they might feel that the counselor might be a little unstable talking about such a sensitive subject since they're both going through it at the same time. It might bring up upsetting feelings for the counselor, and it might affect their relationship. Um, or the client might feel that the counselor is comparing their divorce against their own. I just feel that it would be hard to convince the client that they have their full attention on this matter if they know the counselor is going through the same difficult situation at the same time as them. Now, to turn the tables around, I think a good time to disclose information unto a client is if the same situation, the client comes in to talk about recent divorce, the counselor might mention that they went through a divorce like maybe 10 years ago. I think that would help since the divorce isn't as fresh and the feelings of the divorce on the counselor isn't as fresh. Um, and it could help the client because the if like say the counselor got divorced maybe like 10 years ago, but is obviously like moved on, got remarried, happy, stable now, it might be okay to disclose it. Um, because it allows the client to feel more comfortable knowing the counselor had been through the same experience, so they get that they weren't. So they get the same feelings of not being judged, and they get to see how the counselor has moved on and is much happier. It could give the client hope and inspiration. So I think in that aspect, it could be a good thing. But I mean, it really all just depends on the situation. The client, like according to our textbook, the best advice when self-disclosing is if it feels good, don't do it. If, as a counselor, we want to disclose information to just get it off our chest and make ourselves feel better, then we just shouldn't do it. I think just the good rule of thumb in this situation for self-disclosing any information. We just must always remember our place is to be the counselor first and foremost, and that our client is the one that always comes first in our counseling sessions. Have a good night.